In the spring, when ewes are lambing, and the rams do watchful stand, come the days of gentle warming, longer lights on softer land. Gone are meaner, darker days, when in winter's bitter lair, sheep do blossom woolly capes to shield them from the icy air. Now the shearer comes around to shave away their curly coats, and take the greasy wool to town for use by nimble Ulster folk. Shear the sheep with gentle strokes to rid them of their winter coats. Side to back and tail to head, shave the wool which must be shed, and save the shell which has been shorn, for we who are not woolly born.
We are here this afternoon to commemorate the life of Don Bailey. On behalf of Betty and Linda, Barbara and Norm, Blair and Anna June, and the rest of the Bailey family, thank you for coming. We're glad you're here. Much of what's planned today is the sharing of memories and telling of stories. There are some that have been prepared ahead of time. There's some that have mailed letters that we're going to read. But we want to make sure that we take the time that it takes to hear the stories and to remember our times with Don. So there'll be a time when there'll be microphones available for everybody who wants to share, so feel free to do that. Would you pray with me, please? Gracious Heavenly Father, thank you for these people, for this place, where we can come together to remember, to mourn, to laugh, cry, to offer and receive comfort, to honor Don. Thank you for his life as husband, father, grandfather, brother, uncle, mentor, and friend. Favor us, we pray, with your presence this hour, this day, and in the days ahead. Amen.
Every once in a while, I'm given an impossible task. This is one of them. How do you sum up a man's life who is bigger than life when I only knew him for a short time? Folks, it'd be disingenuous of me to tell you stories that you know better than I do. We're going to have a chance to do that, and I look forward to it, because as I told the family when I moved here in July, I met Don and I said, this is one of those people I wish I had a long time to get to know. As we went out and we talked birding, and we talked this and we talked that, and I saw a great joy in this man as we just talked about nuthatches and collared doves and juncos. For those of you who aren't sure, those are birds. And he told me about his life, and he said, you know, I drove 40,000 miles one year and I never left Douglas County. And I thought, this is a man I need to know. And he said one time when he came to church, he said, I want to have you over, Betty and I want to have you over. We have tea at 2 p.m. and we'd love to have you then. You know, he's just kind of Don. He's just telling you what you were needed to do and how you were going to do it in the right way. That bigger than life person. And as I listened to him, I thought there's something different here, because I've met bigger than life people, and quite honestly, some of them, I'd go out of my way to stay away from them because they were a royal pain in the neck. But Don I was drawn to. And then I began to hear stories of other people who told me about Don, about more than all of the accolades that he had, those pictures and those plaques and all of the stuff, and began to tell me about the human Don, The Don that loved his wife deeply and fiercely and joyfully, and who loved what he did and changed lives. And as I began to listen to it, I thought, the best thing I can say is that this man, no matter where he went, knew how to build community. He knew how to bring people together in a way that benefited everybody. I saw in one of the stories that a fellow said, Don taught me a lot so that I didn't need to call him quite as much. Now, isn't that the definition of community, that puts the good of the community above the good of the self? You know, we've all known those people who would make sure that you were dependent on them so that they could get more and more out of you. And Don said that's not what we're about. We're about building community. We're about helping one another. We're about creating ways for people to become the best that they can be. And we all know Don wanted the best. Wanted the best out of all of us. And we celebrate that. And as I was thinking about Don, I was thinking, you know, there's the scripture that we use all the time at funerals, that 14th chapter of John, where he's gathered with his community, that community that he created, that I think was a lot like Don's, that was about as diverse a group as you could get together. I mean, think of the most radical leftist person you could think of, and that's Judas Iscariot. And think about others on the right. There was a Matthew who was a tax collector. And these two people, Matthew and Judas, had sworn to be enemies. In fact, Judas, as a zealot, would kill any tax collector he met because they were traitors in their mind. And yet somehow Jesus brought them together in a short time. And he created community. And then at that Last Supper, you know, that time we're celebrating now, when Jesus gathered his people together, and he said, in my Father's house, there are many rooms. If it were not so, would I have told you that I'm going to prepare a place for you? In that amazing diversity and that sureness that Jesus had, there's plenty of room. There's plenty of room because we build a community that is bigger. Your presence here today reminds all of us that Don touched lives in amazingly different ways. He touched lives in giving of himself, in being there in that amazingly painful time when you say goodbye to a beloved animal, where there can either be a harsh light or there can be compassion. And I've had too many people tell me that Don was compassionate in the way he sat with people while their animals were dying. And I've been one of those who's blubbered over a pet that was no longer part of my life, and I know what a great comfort that is. Building that community, bringing people together in amazingly different ways. And Jesus said, I've gone to prepare a place for you, that where I am, you'll be also. One of the communities that Don was a part of was the Methodist Church. And I use those words intentionally because Don was part of the Roseburg Church in all of those changes that went through, and you know, we've gone through a bunch of them. We've been Methodist, Episcopal, and Methodist, and United Methodist, and somehow Don was with us in that whole process, and we are blessed by his legacy. We're blessed by his love. We're blessed by that generosity. We're blessed by his gracious spirit. And it is fitting that tomorrow we'll be celebrating out where we've always celebrated. In fact, a couple of weeks ago, just before Don passed away, I went out to see him. And I wasn't going to talk about where we're going to do the sunrise service out at his place because I didn't think it seemed right, and someone brought it up, and Don, weak though he was, said, it's going to be up there. And I said, okay, Don, it'll be there. We'll make sure that you hear it. And Don, being Don, did me one better. so that He will hear it now without us having to pipe it in. He will be there. His Spirit will guide us and will lead us as we gather to celebrate that thing that Jesus talked about, resurrection. There are very few things in this world that I know. And I've discovered as I've gotten older, I know less. I used to know everything. I was obnoxious. I knew everything there was to know. And sadly, God forgive me, I was not shy in sharing my opinion. But I've learned a lot as I've got older, and that is I don't know much. But I do know this. I do know that there is a God of love. And I do know that Don's life has been a celebration of that God of love, that God who has welcomed him. And I do know that there is resurrection. Now, I will tell you, I don't know what that's going to look like. I know there are books all over the place of people who've been there and come back. And thank you for writing those books, but it's still a mystery. We don't know. But we do know resurrection. We do know that God, who in Christ died, has been raised and shows us the way, a way of grace, a way of love. And one of the best definitions, one of the best experiences, stories I've ever heard about heaven takes some of the imagery that we know. You know, they're always the image of the golden gates and streets paved with gold, and St. Peter there waiting to talk to us as we enter into heaven. And one of the stories that I love is of a person who died and was presenting himself to the gates of heaven, and St. Peter said, "Welcome, we're so glad you're here. You know, you've served well, and we're so glad that you're here. But you know the rules, right?" And he said, "Yeah, I know the rules." He says, "Well, one of the rules is you can't take anything into heaven with you. You come into heaven the way you came into life. You come just with yourself." And he said, "I don't have anything." Peter said, "What's that in your hand?" You know, and what usually happens when you get caught? Nothing. Let me see what it is. He said, "It's just a piece of paper with a list on it." You know the rules. The rules are, I got to see it. Reluctantly handed it over, and on that list were a list of names of those who had gone before. And Peter, with a great joy, said, "You know, I know these names. In fact, I think I just saw them down the street making a sign that said, 'Welcome home.' I have no doubt. I know. I bet my life on it that there are those who have greeted Don and said, 'Welcome home. Welcome home, good and faithful warrior. You have been true in many things. You have been true in life. You have been true in the way you live. Enter now into the joy of the Lord." I celebrate that, and I look forward to hearing the stories that we're going to share. And one of the other realities is that sometimes community hurts. And I mean by that, when you've shared life with someone and they're not there, there's a hole, and it hurts. Now, I know we live in an instant society. I know that we are so proud that our phones can get us clear across the world in 2 seconds, and if you Google something, you can get 350 million responses in 5 seconds. But instant doesn't work in creating community. Community doesn't come instantly. It comes when you laugh. It comes when you cry. It comes when you stand at the graveside of a grandson. It comes when you look at someone you shared life with for years and years, and you tell stories of how lucky you were to marry them. And you remember disagreements. And over the lifetime, you create community. So I do invite you to grieve. As we're telling stories, some of them are going to bring tears. That's okay. Some of them are going to be laughing. That's okay. But don't expect to be done with everything today. It's not going to happen. As it takes time to learn to be community, so you grieve that for a period of time. And you'll tell stories, and you'll laugh, and you'll remember, and you'll look at sheep, and you'll think of Don, and you'll look at the legacy that he's left, and you'll give thanks to God for Don's life. In life, in death, in life beyond death, we are more than conquerors through him who loved us. Nothing, not even death, can separate us from God's love. Nothing, not even death, separates us from the community that we are in the presence of God. Thanks be to God, who is and was and evermore shall be. Amen.
I asked Jody, my daughter, and Brad, my son, to join me just in case I can't finish this. And maybe they could read it. That was a great video and tribute to Don. And appreciate all of you being here as a tribute to his life. My involvement with Don goes back to when he first moved here. And I want to share with you some of the things we enjoyed. In fact, if he could have, he would have enjoyed today being no offense, Mike, he would have enjoyed being the MC because he liked being in control. And those of you that know Don know that to be true. Don lived a full and wonderful life doing the things he loved: family, vet medicine, ranching, and community involvement. And he did it with great skill and love and pride. He received many awards and honors, with the latest being the 2012 Roseburg First Citizen of the Year. He was very proud of that honor. Don knew so many people in the county, I also used to call him Mr. Douglas County. Don and Betty got married at 19 and were married for 72 years, and if you can believe it, I was the ring bearer at their wedding in 1945. So I take a little credit for that. Don decided to take over the vet practice in Roseburg in 1950. Our family decided to join him, and I was in the 8th grade. Mom and Dad helped out in the business, and I worked as a kennel boy while going to high school. In fact, on Sundays, I always put the funny papers up for the dogs. And they appreciated me a lot for that. My brother finished vet school and joined the practice in 1958. It was a family operation, and it wasn't unusual for me to come home from school sometime and find my mother in the back of the kennel room crying with somebody who had just lost a pet. Happened many times. And then if they didn't have a place to bury it, my dad would bury the dog in our front yard. And that happened many times. In the early 50s, Don enjoyed water skiing, and we used to go up to Cottage Grove Reservoir. And one day, Don bought this old wooden Chris Craft boat that was in pieces, and required a lot of work. But we finally got it going, and it would go about 40 miles an hour. One day, this young person showed up in Cottage Grove there at the reservoir in a Vespa motor scooter with a camera and claiming he was with National Geographic. And you've heard how much Don likes National Geographic. And wanted to take pictures and write an article on Oregon recreation. Wow, a chance to be famous. Betty fed him a nice lunch, and Don and Betty got him into the boat, and I got my skis on him and put on quite a show, and he took lots of pictures. And we showed off. At the end of the day, he thanked us for lunch and the boat ride and told us to watch for a future article in the magazine that would feature our family. Well, actually, we are still waiting for the pictures of our Actually, if they did, after 60 years, nobody would recognize us. And we wonder if he even had film in the camera. But he was a nice guy, and we enjoyed him, and he enjoyed us. Another time water skiing, Don came to the dock a little fast, and when he got up on the bow to catch the boat, he cut his knee bad on a glass windshield, broke the windshield, cut his knee. So I thought we'd have to go to the emergency room. Well, much of Don used to haul the boat with his station wagon that had all his vet supplies. And much to my surprise, he deadened the cut and stitched it himself. And I was really impressed. I couldn't believe it. I used to go to large animal calls with Don to open and close gates and sometimes drive. After he treated the animal at this one ranch, the hired hand wanted to ride to town. And we said fine, and we had just left the house and we were crossing a creek on a wooden bridge when the man screamed, and I thought the bridge was collapsing. Don had forgotten to tell him about the cattle prod in the back seat. I mean, it wasn't a little scream, and I turned around, his mouth was open, his back was bowed. Don, when he'd go to the doctor, he took pride in being quiet when the doctor came in. And he would make some comment like, he says, "My patients don't tell me what's wrong." I remember once Betty had a sore hip, and Don, when he went to call to make an appointment for her, he told the receptionist it was her hind leg. He never lived that down. I'm sorry, Betty. For the last 10 years or so, Don and I would talk by phone every Sunday night after watching TV 60 Minutes. And we covered a wide range of topics, and I was always amazed at how well my brother was informed and up to date on all the issues. We talked a lot about family and how lucky the three of us were to grow up with loving parents that put family first and taught us important life skills and values by example. And they did pretty good to raise 2 vets and 1 garbage man. We were very fortunate to have Don in our lives and family for all these years. He will be greatly missed but never ever forgotten. Thank you very much.
Ray Sims was a friend of Don's since the early 50s, and for well over 50 years through service in the United Methodist Church and the Kiwanis. They were both leaders in our community.
Dr. Don Bailey would be delighted to see me standing here in front of you this afternoon wearing this top. It's very bright up here, but I'm showing off a little bit over in the corner. You see, he attended the First United Methodist Church in Roseburg, practically a lifetime member. And since he was in the Lord's house, he wore a nice suit of clothes, a white shirt, and some interesting ties. All of this showed off his sense of humor when he was outside of off the range. He wore bright colors all season. On St. Patrick's Day, he wore gaudy green, and on Christmas, a picture of Santa Claus on his tie. And then for New Year's, that was a prize because he had Christmas lights running up and down who died during the church service. Worse than that, he had to involve the other Methodist men in a challenge to see who could wear the brightest necktie. I think Jim Cole won the prize, and I imagine Jim is here in the audience someplace. But in fact, if you attend the Methodist Church tomorrow morning, you'll probably find Jim Cole there wearing the craziest tie that you ever saw. Betty and Don Bailey and my wife and I all came to Roseburg over 50 years ago. And about the first thing we did, the first thing Don and I did was join the Kiwanis Club. You may recall that Kiwanis is an international organization that is dedicated to the youth of the community and dedicated to improving their position. Well, this was right down Don's alley. He started the sheep chain for the 4-H and the FFA, that's the Future Farmers of America, young people. To publicize the chain, he decided to present a live lamb at the noon luncheon of the Kiwanis Club. And the luncheon was that time was being held in the Oldham Hotel. Well, Bill Gray and Don drugged that frightened lamb, that animal, up the outside fire escape, the room, and placed the ewe ceremoniously on the head table, right in front of the president. Of course, this object was to get some attention to publicize this event so that it might carry on in the future. Well, the cameras clicked, and the newspaper presented the story on the front page of the News Review the next day. So the entire county knew about this sheep chain that Don was so proud to present at that time. My prayer is that Jesus Christ will find an appropriate place in God's heaven for Don. Amen.
Tom Foster was the pastor at the United Methodist Church from 1987 to 1996. He wasn't able to be here today, but he mailed this tribute that I'd like to read. Don Bailey was one of the most outstanding men that I was privileged to serve as pastor in my 40 years in the Methodist ministry. One of the aspects of our friendship was as partners in the honeybee business. When I came to Roseburg in 1987, Don had 2 colonies of bees. My father was a commercial beekeeper, so I had grown up in the bee business. Don asked me if I would check on his bees. Unfortunately, I had to tell Don that one of the colonies had a disease, which meant that it needed to be destroyed. A few months later, I determined that the other colony was seeking to raise a new queen, and hence, to prevent that colony from swarming, I killed the old queen. Well, that new queen did not materialize, and now Don's only colony was hopelessly queenless. When I told Don this sad news, he said, "Oh my goodness, before you came along, I was doing fine." And now you managed to kill both my colonies. Eventually, I redeemed myself, and Don and I became partners in a small bee operation. We had about 30 colonies, and our bees did very well, producing up to 2,000 pounds of honey one year. One story I enjoy sharing is about the time we had harvested honey from a bee yard, which was located a short distance from the Bailey's house on the ranch. We brought the combs containing honey to the meat house, which is quite near the Bailey's home. A number of bees, as usual, had clung to the combs and continued to fly about while we extracted, understandably concerned with what was happening to their honey. We were well into the extracting and processing when Betty called us to come to dinner. I told Don we could go in for dinner and come back to the honey processing later. Don said, "But what about the bees that are in the meat house?" And I said, "Oh, the sun will be down soon and the bees will fly back to their colonies."
Well, after dinner, when we went back out to the meat house, it was literally full of bees. The bees had indeed left the meat house and gone home to their colonies all right. However, they did not stay there. They informed the other bees where we'd taken their honey and invited those bees to accompany them back to gather their honey and take it all back to their hives. It was no small task getting all the bees out of the meat house so we could finish on into the evening. Don, being the kind and patient man that he was, continued to have faith in me. I'm sure he determined that hopefully I was a better preacher and pastor than I was a beekeeper. Don and Betty's involvement and support in the Roseburg United Methodist Church during their many decades of residency in Roseburg was exceptional. That participation in ways large or small will long remain in the memories of long-timers. What the church is today, in many ways, reflects that dedication. The hillside above their home, which now is made all the more precious as Don's final resting place, served as a place of commitment to those making the annual Easter Sunday sunrise trek. There could not be a more perfect place to pause, reflecting on the meaning of the cross and responding to the call that touches the hearts of all those who choose the path of Christianity. Showing children around the farm, welcoming friends and strangers, providing food for body and soul, being a harbor for anyone in need, endlessly reaching out. All these were ways Don and Betty lived out their Christianity. When Colleen and I retired from our 9 years of ministry in Roseburg, Don and Betty Bailey were deeply involved in planning one of the most outstanding surprise retirement farewells for us that any United Methodist pastor has ever had. I think Betty later shared that they had spent some 6 months in planning and arranging this never-to-be-forgotten event, and they pulled it off magnificently. The joy expressed in Don's eyes and his unforgettable smile are a treasure that we've held close to our hearts in all the years that have passed by. We are thankful for Don's long and well-lived life, and honored that I could, for a while, be part of his remarkable journey as his pastor, friend, and fellow. Tim McCarthy is one of the many veterinarians that Don has mentored over the years, a relationship that has led to a lifelong friendship and his official membership in the Bailey family.
He already gave away my reason for being up here speaking, but that's okay. And I am truly honored and humbled to be asked to come and speak about Don's veterinary involvement. Thank you, Linda, for inviting me and be here anyway. And I am truly awed by and overwhelmed by all the people that are here. And it does speak to Don's involvement in the community and in people and in animal care. I'm hoping that when my wife and my son will show up for my celebration. And I am a veterinarian because of Don and Betty Bailey. And I cannot think about Don or speak about Don without including Betty. And today I learned how many years they were married, and it's truly amazing. And I contributed to both of them. And my chance or my exposure that got me interested in veterinary medicine was a chance encounter of the best kind. When I was in junior high school, they eliminated the vocational agriculture program from Roseburg High School. And my mother decided that I needed to be involved in getting that reinstated. So she took me to a meeting at the Bailey's house, the little house next to their clinic there. And I think they were practicing out of the single-car garage at that point in time. It was pretty tiny. And I don't know what happened at that meeting that changed my life. And just something, and it was probably the warmth of the family, and just, I felt truly welcomed. And pretty soon, I was watching Don do surgery, and riding around in his truck with him, and then driving his truck for him, which scared the heck out of him, because I was a typical teenage driver. And I could not do anything else in my life. That is what I was destined to do. And then he got me into veterinary school, which is truly amazing. Because if you knew what my grades were to get in, everybody in the room would fall out of their chairs laughing. So he did more than just a little bit for me. And I think that I was Don's best friend. And I'm sure if all of you think about it for a minute, you probably all feel that you were Don's best friend. And so I went on to be a veterinarian. And it has been the most incredible life that I could ever imagine, beyond my wildest dreams. And he was just truly a wonderful person in my life. And many, many times, Betty would refer to me as her oldest son, because I spent more time growing up at their house than I did at my own home. And so I have a son, Blair, or a brother, Blair, and a sister, Barbara, and a sister, Linda. And this family is as close to me as my regular family. And the other thing, in thinking about his impact on me, and I could stand here and tell funny stories like other people have done all day, but it occurred to me that what would have happened if I did not meet Don and Betty? Because I'm so dyslexic that I can't spell my own name. And I hated school because in the third grade I was able to get 49 out of 50 words wrong on a review spelling test. And when I started the 5th grade, I was reading on a 2nd grade level. And my introduction to the Baileys gave me something that I really wanted to do, and put me to work learning and trying to overcome my dysfunctions. And it worked. And I think about what possibly could have happened if that had not occurred. And I probably wouldn't have made it out of high school. And I would have been in Vietnam. And I either would have died there or come back emotionally destroyed. So thank you, Don and Betty and Linda and Blair and Barbara for giving me a life.
The common thread here is that Don's involvement with people spans lifetimes. Evan Miller is another person who has a lifetime friendship with Don that grew out of their shared commitment to youth education and agriculture through their involvement in the 4-H and FFA.
Thank you, Mike. I was so very honored when Linda asked me to say a few words to celebrate the legacy of Dr. Don Bailey. I had the chance to first meet Don and Betty when my husband and I attended our Uncle Laverne and Merle Murphy's 50th anniversary party. There's nothing more fun than when you can gather together and celebrate with a bunch of farmers and ranchers, not unlike today. At that time, Laverne was excited to introduce me to Don, since both of us shared a love for the future farmers of America. You see, Don was elected State FFA Secretary of California in September of 1944. This was a really big deal, since only 6 people are elected to state office each year in the biggest agricultural state in the nation. And Don hailed from a very small chapter of Upper Lake High School. His service to State FFA was even a bigger deal because that year happened to be 1944 at the peak of World War II. He also had the opportunity to serve at a time when state officers had to serve during their school year. So he was going through his freshman year in college. So imagine going through your freshman year, traveling all across the state of California, giving speeches, and being able to balance all those things. I'd say Don was a wow factor. This began Don's love for agriculture and the FFA. Even though Don ultimately graduated from Colorado State University, he attended Cal Poly right out of high school. One time while visiting Don, I asked, why Cal Poly? He said because it was the best ag school in the state of California, and it had the same motto of learning by doing that FFA had. A little research also told me that that was where they housed all the state FFA staff while he was serving. At the time, Cal Poly was pretty small, 114 students in the entire agricultural department. Now there are 4,200. Don would be pretty amazed. I think he was the right choice about that really good school. Don told me once that if he had not been able to make it into veterinary school, he would have become an ag teacher and FFA advisor. Douglas County is blessed that Don became a veterinarian, but I submit that he was a teacher in so many ways and a champion of agriculture and FFA. Only 2 years after Don and Betty made Douglas County their home, Don was right in the thick of things helping FFA. Don, LaBrie Ritchie, Don Harmon, Don Cruz, and Lee Sands' parents intervened to keep FFA alive at Roseburg High. They convinced the school board, which had never been done before, to let volunteers run the FFA program so the students didn't have to miss a step in their advancement of their degrees while they searched for another ag teacher. Don's service to FFA through these years was rewarded in 1981. This honor meant the world to Don, since after he served as an FFA state officer, instead of pursuing his American farmer degree, which the rest of his peers on his officer team did, he focused on vet school. Now, after all those years, he was receiving the honorary American farmer degree, the highest degree honoring service to the organization he loved. Coincidentally, Don received this honor in Kansas City the year after I served as a national FFA officer. 1 year earlier, I would have gotten to shake Don's hand on stage. Not surprising, the award did not stop Don's commitment to the young people of our county. Even though Roseburg FFA had its ups and downs, which you heard earlier, Don was always eager to support. This was a topic of discussion every time I visited Don. What have I done lately for FFA? He not only provided financial, but moral support. Just a couple of years ago, Don offered his ranch yet again for the soils judging event when Roseburg FFA hosted. No question, Don Bailey understood well that support of FFA and 4-H is essential to build the leaders of tomorrow. This is a legacy that I'm sure Don would like each and every one of us in this room to live out in the years to come.
Deputy Lee Bartholomew is a well-known friend of both people and animals, and he'll be the third person up here that started out as a kennel boy at Bailey Veterinary Clinic.
Well, from my own personal way I knew Dr. Don is we used to have a boarding kennel when I was growing up, and we had a ranch, and he was our vet. And every time he saw me as a child, he would tell me, when you get old enough, you come and look me up and I'll get you a job. So when I became a junior in high school, I went over there and actually was interviewed by Dr. Stott Hendy, that's how long ago it was, and was hired and worked there for a couple of years. He then wrote me a recommendation to Oregon State University, which I graduated from. He was not happy that I did not become a veterinarian. He kept reminding me that I was still able to go back to school. Clear up to about 2002, he kept reminding me that. He wrote a recommendation for the job I currently hold, and he wrote a recommendation when I was trying to get custody of my 3 boys, which I did get custody, and now that I think about it, it was probably a practical joke on his part because those 3 boys made me lose all my hair. Anyhow, in about 1998, I had a really big case, and it took 2.5 years. There was like 100 stolen dogs from Douglas County. Some people were selling them to labs in California, and we busted the gang of people doing that. And in 2002, I got a phone call from Dr. Don. And Dr. Don said, you know what? I don't think you're meant to be a veterinarian. I think you've been destined to help the animals and the public of Douglas County in a different way, which made me feel really good. So, that's how I know him for a long time. I'd like to read some letters that were sent to the family. The first one comes from Jeremiah Winston. It says, please pass this message to Betty Bailey, as it doesn't necessarily need to be read during the service, but we're doing it anyhow. I was truly saddened to hear the passing of Dr. Bailey, or Doc, as I knew him. Unfortunately, I will not be able to attend his service, but I wanted to pass my sincerest condolences to Betty and the rest of the Bailey family, as Doc was one of the greatest mentors I had as a young man. Betty, you may not remember me, but I've had such fond memories of working for you and Doc on your farm with my friend Devlin, all through the summers of 97 through 99 of our high school years. Doc was so patient with all of us. He had such a teacher spirit and provided tender leadership, mentorship, and guidance to the young men who performed such back-breaking work. To this day still, I miss the smell of fresh cut hay, the musk of the old barn, the dust and the sunbeams as it shined through the boards, and Doc's funny stories about life, love, and philosophy. I remember fondly how we would meet at daybreak to beat the heat, try our best to get 2 or 3 loads of hay in before lunch, and you, Betty, would have prepared for us such delicious meals, or bagels and honey if Doc was hankering for a midday snack. Oftentimes, lunch was followed up with an after-lunch nap. Boy, what I wouldn't pay to be able to nap on the job now. I sure do miss living in the country. I left Winston Roseburg in the summer of 2000 and joined the military in 2001. I have served in the U.S. Coast Guard for 17 years, achieved the rank of Chief Warrant Officer, and I oversee oil spill and natural disaster emergency response. To this day, I still strive to take care of my people the way you and Doc took care of me and many others. I am so truly grateful to have been given the opportunity for both of you to be a part of my life. You both taught me the value of hard work and laid the groundwork for the kind of leader that I strive to emulate to this day. A part of me truly misses the simpler life on the farm, and I have you and Doc to thank for that. So many more wonderful memories I have of the experiences I had working for you both. Dr. Bailey will always be in my heart. God bless you and your family. This story is from David Sayers. About 30 years ago on Christmas Day, our family had just finished opening our Christmas presents. I heard something at our sliding patio glass door, so I went to investigate. Staring back at me was my dog, an Alaskan Malamute Husky, with her muzzle covered with porcupine quills. I could only imagine how she must have been suffering. I was thinking, why this had to happen on Christmas Day of all days? How would I ever find a veterinarian office that would be open or would open for my emergency? Fortunately, my mother knew the Bailey family since both she and Betty Bailey were friends and belonged to the same PEO organization. A phone call was made to the Bailey's home, and Don was informed of my dog's condition. Without a moment's hesitation, he said he would meet us at the clinic and open it just for us. When we got to the clinic, Don met us and immediately went to work numbing the dog and pulling out the quills. When I asked how much I owed, he just said, "Merry Christmas." That was how I first met this wonderful man and became personal friends with Don and his wonderful wife, Betty. He will be greatly missed by all who knew him. This letter is from Robert Klinger. What a loss. Surely one of the best sheepmen I've ever heard of or had the informative pleasure to know and have as a friend. I first met Doc at the Roseburg Ram sale. He was giving a presentation on sheep raising. What else? I was there as the sheep farm manager of OSU, only several weeks on the job that lasted 25 years, with our rams brought for the sale. One of the things he said that has stuck in my mind forever, and which I have used, with credit to him, to everyone I have ever tried to help raise sheep, was, what is the most important antibiotic to have in a lambing barn? Penicillin. It was that kind of simple, factual, enlightening, and undeniable gem of wisdom that even this Pole, born and raised in Chicago, couldn't help but be improved by. He will be in my nightly litany of saints from tonight on, with warmest regards and with the knowledge that it is good to have friends in high places. Robert Klinger. This is from Janet Dixon. On a certain day, Dr. Don was called to our ranch to tend one of our feeder calves that had been stepped on by the other calves. As Dr. Don was working on the calf, a comment was made regarding the mental ability of said calf. How can they be as stupid? Dr. Don calmly replied, they are doing their best with the ability that God gave them, and I've heard of cattle to be more sensible than a crowd of people. After that, no other comments regarding cattle's mental ability was heard. Dr. Don would also take time to stop after treating an animal and share a piece of homemade pie and visit a while. Wonderful visits. In addition to being a great and caring vet for our animals, he was a good friend from the family of Forrest and Dorothy Branch. From John Riggs. I'm John Riggs, and like a lot of you, my ties to Don go back quite a ways. Back in the 50s and 60s, we always took our dogs to Bailey's. He inspired our neighbor Tim McCarthy to become a veterinarian, and his brother Mike to be a farmer. But fast forward to the 90s and the 2000s, and I'd see Don and Betty frequently as farmers market customers. And Don, of course, shared excitement about our kids' progress toward their goals, especially our daughter Gigi, who is now a veterinary dental specialist in downtown Seattle. In the spring of 2011, I made a very emotional decision to leave my teaching position. After a lot of praying, all I knew was that I wanted to work for myself and to work outside. But I didn't have the appropriate land to expand my gardening endeavors. A friend who mentored me on how to grow tomatoes and melons said, why don't you just go ask someone who lives along the river? A sensible idea. but it could involve knocking on a lot of doors. The river is long. Something unexplainable told me to knock on Don's first, though I hadn't seen him in months. Again, this was 2011, a cloudy and rainy spring afternoon when I arrived unannounced. Don answered the door, delighted and visibly excited to see me. And this is the most amazing part. Before I could say a darn thing, before I could say that I had come to ask him if I could use an acre, or just a half acre, or even a quarter acre for farming, before I could get a single word out of my mouth, he cut me off. He said, John, I've been thinking about you every single day. I can't get this out of my mind. I want you to farm some land down by the river. I have 6 acres down there. I tried to get a word in edgewise, tried repeatedly to tell him I couldn't believe this. I said, I can't, but on and on he went. Oh, yes you can, John. We have tractors you could use. Oh, yes you can. I can give you some help. Oh, yes you can, John. There's irrigation down there. And on he went. I left his doorstep literally in tears. I'm not usually smart enough to know when God is working through someone in my presence. But by golly, I was getting this one. And it wasn't over yet. As I walked back to my pickup, the sun burst through the clouds and flooded the whole gorgeous farm. And upon turning on the radio in my truck, a wonderful Elton John song was playing, How Wonderful Life Is When You Are in My World. Enough already. I got it. This was truly a spiritual experience. And a fulfilling one as well. Don dubbed me Farmer John. Barb told me privately that this was my name now, that I needed to accept it, and that it was an honor. Anyway, over the past 7 years, Don and I had countless conversations about farming and life, and he always lovingly called me partner. We became very close, and I will miss my friend.
Back in the mid-70s, Douglas County was one of the known as the sheep capital in the United States. There were over 100,000 sheep just in Douglas County alone. So Don got lots of practice working on sheep. And because of that, he got involved with the American Association of Small Animal Ruminants and literally traveled all over the world speaking about working and treating sheep. So in one of those travels, he went down to the University of California, Davis in the fall, in the winter of 74, 75, and spoke to a group of students. And he said, well, if you ever get up to Roseburg, stop by and say hello. So a sunny February afternoon in 75, we came by and knocked on his door and said hello. And he invited us in for Sunday dinner, talked to us, showed us all around, and said it was always sunny that way in February. So that was the start. We ended up coming to Roseburg after that, and they welcomed Sandy and I welcomed into the town, and it's been a long visit ever since. We were one of many veterinarians that have worked at Bailey Veterinary Clinic, and one of the first, and there's a lot of veterinarians here today that have been in those same footsteps. So he was truly a great mentor. He was very active in not only in the community, but also in the veterinary organization, and the state organization, and the examining board, and did a lot of things for veterinary medicine. Helped keep the veterinary school going at OSU at one point when they were threatening to close it. So he has a long list of things he's helped with veterinary medicine besides the people here in Douglas County. So it's truly an honor.
I have a lot of stories I could tell, but I'm just gonna share a short one. I was at the livestock auction, the 4-H and FFA auction. I'm trying to remember how old my daughter was, 43 years ago. And I was in labor. And Don was sitting on one side of the ring and I was sitting on the other. And he kept looking at me. And pretty soon he comes over to me and he said, "Peggy, are you in labor?" And I said, "Yes." And he said, "Well, I can help you, but you gotta go stick your head in the squeezer."
This isn't about animals. I am a member of a group called SOT, Sane Orderly Development. We've tried to educate the city and county on occasion on land use, and he was a member of our group. And one thing that happened, one of our battles, Blair apparently was trying to sell a piece of acreage to be subdivided, and he told us quite simply he would disinherit you if you did. The second thing, 6 or 7, maybe 8 years ago, the city, county, and the college went together, hired a gentleman to try and bring in some businesses or something to help develop Douglas County. Well, this gentleman that they brought in was had talked to a college from either Iowa or Kansas, and they were looking at building a medical technical institute here in Roseburg. And one of the pieces of property they were looking at was belonging to Doc. And we invited them to a sod meeting in my dining room. And this gentleman came representing all these people and representing, he had some beautiful plans. He had some property of the Bailey Ranch that he had it all laid out and plotted with the buildings, stage 1, stage 2 of how they were going to build this college. The road end was going to be Bailey Road. He had the whole thing. And we asked him, have you talked to Doc Bailey about this? He says, well, no, I haven't got around that. I said, would you like to? I said, that gentleman sitting right there next to you, he is Doc Bailey. And that was introduced, and Dr. Bailey was interested. Unfortunately, I think the financing did not come through for that.
Lots of jokes, lots of wonderful stories. But I got one hard. My mother and my sister and I moved out here when I was 14, and I was almost 61, so it's a while ago. Every single incident that ever happened to me, he was always there. 2 o'clock in the morning, 6 o'clock, 10 o'clock, whatever. Didn't matter. He was there. And he made hospital absolutely necessary. And I love that man. And I love his son. I'm sorry, I don't really know the rest of the family. I love his son because he's just like his dad. And they have the same policy, always available. Even if it's just a neck to hang on and she cried. And every employee that hangs on is the same way. Dr. Mary, Dr. Hope, everyone just as loving, just as caring, and always available. And the girls at the desk, oh, heaven on earth. Thank you, Dr. Don, for your legacy.
I'll make sure I get this far enough away because I've been accused of time to time talking a little loud. But I graduated from Oregon State University in 1971, and on the board in the Ag Education Department, there was a notice of about a school that wanted to start a brand new ag program, and it was called Glide Oregon. I had no idea where in the world Glide was at the time, but I found it on the map, and I came down and I interviewed for the job, and they hired me. And I had never ever started, that was going to be my first year as an agriculture teacher. And my first year as an agriculture teacher and FFA advisor was at Glide High School. School started in September, and it wasn't very long into the school year, I got a call from this gentleman, and he said, my name is Dr. Don Bailey. I didn't know who he was either at the time. And he talked about his involvement in FFA in California, his involvement with he was on the advisory committee for the Roseburg FFA chapter, and he said, if there's anything you need, you just let me know. Well, the next week, I'm in my classroom trying to figure out what's going on because I really don't know what I'm doing yet. And somebody, the office calls and says, you have a visitor. Dr. Don walks into my classroom. And he said, well, what kind of things are you going to try and teach? So I kind of told him what they had told me the curriculum was for the year. And he said, nah, I don't worry about that. He said, well, we do these kinds of things. And pretty soon he had a whole new curriculum. And I thought it was a lot neater and a lot more fun. And the other thing he said,
ever need anything, you just let me know. And so over the years, go one thing further. The thing I remember more than anything else is that every time he would leave the clinic and coming toward Glide to do any kind of thing on the ranches of Glide, he gave me a call. Well, the administration at the high school at that time didn't know anything about ag programs either, so I just tell them I've got to go. I've got this field trip coming up, and they said, well, you didn't fill out the paperwork. And I just went and got the bus and loaded the kids up and went to wherever Dr. Don was going to be, and it went on for a couple of years until they finally kind of caught on. But he always did the clinics for the 4-H and FFA programs we did here in Douglas County. He did the seminars at the ram sale. I'd be at some kid's house at night and I wouldn't know the answer. I'd call him because he always told me to keep his home phone with me all the time. And I'd call him and half an hour, 40 minutes later, he'd show up. And there would be with the kids and the parents, not only helping them with the problem, but like I said, teaching them about what they needed to do to make things better. The last thing I'd like to share is that Dr. Don did so many seminars all over the world and in California, and he had a little box that he took with him that had a pelvic bone of a sheep mounted in that box. And he used that all the time in the seminars where he teach people about how do you help a ewe when lambing. And it was always, he had these little stuffed animals that he worked with. The only problem was if things didn't work right, he'd reach over the top and kind of straighten it out. And we were doing this seminar one time, and I asked him, I said, well, how do I do that? He said, well, with your hands, you probably shouldn't do anything. But that box is still here, and Dr. Paul is doing those same kind of seminars for our landing school that the Oregon Sheep Growers Association sponsors every year at Mount Alto Ranch. So the legacy will continue for many, many more years to come. A lot of times people will ask me questions, and I was just an ag teacher, so I don't always know the answer, but I still remember many, many times I say, well, Dr. Don used to say that if you do this, or this is what he would recommend, they listen. I know they listen a lot better when it comes from Dr. Don.
Thank you. Don and I and 2 other people a number of years ago made a little, Tom Burke and Hank Johnson made a set of videotapes called Lambing Time Management, and they're over there. Don had one of the last remaining sets. Remember those videotapes? Does anyone remember that technology? In any case, we made that, and we did about 18 months of filming to get 90 minutes worth of final tape. And at one point, Don was in a pen, and we were filming it, and he was kind of in a lambing pen, and he was on the screen, so he was showing the camera how to have different types of syringes and needles. And one of the things that and we were filming, and it's a perfectly normal thing, and he was teaching, and he was explaining how careful you have to be with needles and syringes of different types. And then over on the side of the pen on a post, there was this plastic jug, like a milk jug, which we put the old needles in. We call that for sharp needles, so you can keep them. And at one point, he was reaching over to put the needle in the pen, and his knuckle hit the plastic container, and it fell over, and he leaped this is all on tape, and he leaped to grab it. And of course, he missed. He went over the top of the pen, and then he gets up and he goes, "See, that's how you're supposed to take care of it." At that point, I yelled, "Cut!" And somewhere there's an outtake of that film.
Hi, I'm Don Bailey's niece. And Uncle Don, as I think of him, my husband became the ag teacher at Roseburg High and taught there for 20 odd years. And as I think of it, and when Dan was going to Chico, Uncle Don used to call him and say, you know, you could come to Roseburg. You could come to Roseburg. Well, their time came when Prop 13 in California cut Dan's job, and Uncle Don said, you know, you could come to Roseburg. So Dan did come up and take over the program here because the ag teacher was leaving. And but the thing that John said put me in mind of the fact that while we were at Chico, Dan was talking to, you know, Dan's out there taking care of babies somewhere, but I can't remember the name of the professor, but he was talking to the professor about something, and he said something about Uncle Don Bailey. And the professor said, "The Don Bailey?" And Dan said, "Yeah, in Roseburg, Oregon." And he said he thought the man was going to say, "May I touch you?" Uncle Don, all the years I grew up, we came up and played at Sky Ranch and all that. We never knew he was world famous veterinarian. He was just Uncle Don, you know. And we were clear in college before we really sunk in that he was well known and sought all over the world as a speaker and as a person. And we always wanted him to write that book, and I don't think he ever did.
One story Stefan has told me when he first come to Roseburg, he used to diagnose test all the cattle. And one of his first jobs was diagnose testing between Scottsburg and Reedsport, and a lot of the dairies were on the opposite side of the road that goes to Reedsport. So the growers would meet John in the boat, take him over to the ranch. And one day, going over there in the wintertime, he's got his heavy clothes on, his boots and things, and looking over there, he could see that the farmer had a human hung up there, a live or a dead human. And Don looked at that, he says, "What am I getting myself into?" And he debated, "Hey, what are my options? Do I jump in the river? It's cold, I got my rubber boots on, it's too far to swim to the shore and things." So he decided he'd stay in the boat. When I got over there, there was a bear that the farmers had put down.
I don't know, probably 98% of you guys, but I want to encourage either Linda or Barbara, if they could, to stand up and tell the story about Don and Betty and the asparagus. It's one of the best stories I've ever heard, and it just, for some reason, sets my heart thinking about Don every time I see asparagus. So if I can find one of them, have you?
Well, I have to tell you that I got the greatest joy this last month of being with Dad almost every day. And together we laughed and cried and told stories. And the asparagus one was not brought up. But as I recollected it, the asparagus story is that Dad tried desperately to grow asparagus in the backyard. He built a special box with white sand in and buried the roots and waited. And so it became a bit of a joke. Was it Uncle Bob that he was joking with, and Uncle Bob would just rib him something terrible. So I don't know if it was Mother or if it was Father who found in one of the local stores plastic asparagus. So very cautiously he set it out in the yard and poked it up just a little bit, and of course it was Uncle Bob who happened along and found the first asparagus and didn't pick it, of course, no. Dragged Dad out there and made a big deal about this asparagus, and I think, of course, Dad carefully picked the asparagus and gave it to Uncle Bob, which, of course, was plastic. I do have one other story. Dad's been pressuring me unconsciously to write his stories. And so in the last 2 months, I have had more time. And as I've come, I live in Seattle, by the way, so I'm the middle sister, and you don't know me, not around. And when I do come, I always stay at the ranch. So if you want to get to know me, I was always at the ranch. So one of the stories I want to tell you is one my new favorite from Dad's. In 1950s, or probably 47, they were headed towards Fort Collins, Colorado. And in Fort Collins, when they first arrived, Dad's not in vet school yet, he hasn't been accepted. He has a year of pre-vet and ag that he's taking. And so they sign up for their classes, Mom's taking classes too. And as they sign up, they talk to the register and says, anybody's got work, we need work and a place to live. So they say, yeah, down on Cherry Hill, Daddy Dunn is a fellow who's lost his wife and he's looking for a cook. And so, sure enough, when they got done registering, they headed down to Cherry Hill and met Daddy Dunn. And so Daddy Dunn says to my mom, Betty, can you cook? Can you cook good? And Mom said, I can cook, and I can cook good. So they got the apartment, which was really just the upper story of the farmhouse, but Dad said it was a very beautiful farmhouse with French doors and beautiful windows and sheer curtains across the glass windows, and it looked out over the entire Macintosh apple orchard that Daddy Dunn operated. So Mom went to work as a cook in school. Dad was the handyman and helped out around. So the title of this is Dynamite. So one day, Daddy Dunn comes to Dad and says, I need some help, lost some trees, we need to get them out of there and plant new trees. So Daddy Dunn takes him to the basement of the big old house and gives him the stick of dynamite, the fuse, the cap. Dad's never worked with dynamite before, so he kind of gave him the basics. Headed out to the orchard, pointed out a few trees he needed removed, and Dad loaded all the dynamite around and lit them all up and was heading out away when all of a sudden one of the ranch dogs ran between his legs and touched the dynamite. And Dad was going, uh-oh, I'm going to save the dog, I'm going to save myself, he's going to blow, heck with the dog. So he headed out and got far enough away, and all of a sudden, boom, and parts of these apple trees are flying up in the air and just going around, and Dad's all worried about the dog. And he looks, and the dog was out chasing all the wood that's falling from the side. And Dad goes, I've done this one before. So that's my current favorite story. So Dad was the love of my life. Oh, I'm married, so I guess I have to. But Dad and I were best friends. We had so much fun together. I was this little buddy when I was young, and he drug me to calls everywhere. And my unfavorite memory is the fact that anytime you have one of those milk feeder cows, what are you going to do? You're going to give them fluids. What are the fluids? The stickiest stuff in the whole world. And if I'm only 5'2" now, I was what, 4-0? Who always held the fluids? So I'm holding this jug up in the air with the line going to the cow, and it's running down my arm. Always. How can you never get that hooked up right? So I have wonderful fond memories of going home. So I love all your stories. Thank you. We had all of our cheers yesterday. Today is a celebration. And Dad wrote down everything that we have done. All the poetry, all the songs, who was singing. Talk about wanting to be in control. And in fact, we had a private viewing and time with Dad early yesterday morning. And I just kept pulling things out of his file. We read about the poetry say that was talking about in marriage it takes 3. You, your wife, and your father. We read a poem about his love of nation. And the fact that he meant that all people should be treated equal under this great plan that God has given us. So thank you for your stories. Please continue. I brought the letters that you didn't even know, the road right at the house, from people with wonderful stories. So there's quite a few more letters.
I just wanted to recognize Dr. Don for his love of education and educating the farmers and the county agents in all things agriculture and animals. And Dr. Don helped with several educational programs over the years with Extension Service. But the one I remember the best is when I was teaching module on animal nutrition ration formulation. And I asked everyone in the room who wants to be the guinea pig and let me know what their ration is. Dan Harris sunk in his chair. All the other guys that were there, and Dr. Don said, "Okay, I'll let you know what I feed my ewes at certain times." And he listed all the things that he would feed them, and I wrote out all the math. Amount of protein times the amount of the feed equals this much, and how much the ewe would need, and it matched 100% perfectly the book values. And I said, "Wow, Dr. Don, you're really good. How did you do that?" And he said, "Well, I've been feeding ewes for over 100 years. That's how. I just know what I feed them and how they react and how good they are." So just a little of my favorite memory and the love that Dr. Don had for education.
Hi. I wonder if Barb has heard this one. Dr. Don told me this little story. It has to do with his world-renowned reputation and so on, but I hope I can get the gist of it. He was going to go to Australia to give a talk on sheep, and he got down to, it was either San Francisco or Sacramento, and of all things, the darn airline, I think it was Qantas, had double booked. And so he didn't have a seat. And so he thought he was, painted into a corner, but somebody suggested, well, why don't just by chance, why don't you just call the consulate, they have one in San Francisco, and see if they can help you out. And so he called them, and they're going like, wait a minute, you're coming to Australia to talk about sheep, and you don't have a ticket? And, they've got that 20 million sheep and 12 million people. It's like he had their attention. And they said, we can't guarantee anything, but why don't you just go back to the Qantas desk tomorrow and see what happens? And so they made it real clear that they can't guarantee anything, that, the government and the private companies are separate entities. Well, he goes back to Qantas the next day, and they were there to greet him, and they had a first-class ticket ready for him.
If I were to choose one word to describe Dr. Don, it would be shepherd. These stories and testimonials that we've heard describe a life well lived, a life that made the world a better place. It's the life of a caretaker, a husbandman, open-hearted and generous, dedicated to the care of animals, the land, and people. He was a servant leader. The last public teaching of Jesus that the Apostle John records in his Gospel is the allegory of the Good Shepherd, from chapter 10. In the agrarian culture of that time, the symbolism and historical significance of the story would not have been lost on the people that Jesus was addressing. In those days, and in many places in the world today, the sheep of many owners are commonly brought together in a single place for the evening for protection against predators. There was a gatekeeper, a single guard stationed at the only gate, and in the morning, the individual shepherds would come and call their flock. The sheep responded to the voice of their shepherd and would follow as he walked ahead of them to lead them out to graze. In this allegory, Jesus describes himself as a good shepherd. 5 times in the story, he relates how the good shepherd intimately knows his sheep and is known by his sheep. He knows them and they know his voice. He calls them, they recognize his voice, and they follow him. In 4 other places, Jesus states that the good shepherd voluntarily lays down his life to protect his sheep. His actions of sacrificial love are a reflection of his Father's love for him, and by extension, the Father's love for the flock. Jesus concludes the allegory by saying, "My sheep listen to my voice. I know them, and they follow me. I give them eternal life, and they shall never perish. No one can snatch them out of my hand. My Father, who has given them to me, is greater than all. No one can snatch them out of my Father's hand. I and the Father are one." Excuse me. Eternal life, abundant life, is life lived in the presence of God. It's not bound by time or by the other rules of this world, where our acceptance and reward is predicated on what we do or don't do. Even the many and good accomplishments of Dr. Don, even they can't earn life with God. It's a gift by grace, freely given, and it is secure. Nothing can separate us from God's love. The Good Shepherd has secured it. That very simply is the gospel, the good news, that God so loved the world that he gave his only begotten Son, that whoever believes in him will not perish, but have eternal life. For probably the first 10 years that I worked at Bailey Vet Clinic, it was impossible to go out on a large animal call, especially after hours, and not hear a story of some miracle that Dr. Don or Dr. Bob had wrought. One evening, a middle-aged man told me how, as a child, how worried he was when one of their animals would be sick or injured and his father would have to call the vet. He also related about how relieved he felt as a boy when he saw Dr. Don's car pull into the driveway. He knew then that everything was going to be all right. He probably told me that story because he knew I needed all the help I could get, including invoking the name of Dr. Don. Dr. Don showed up, as we've heard, often sacrificially, but always with generosity and love. We've heard the stories of his willingness and his ability to lead and to give to communities both large and small, in ways both large and small. Often sacrificially, but always with generosity and love. A servant leader. In the days preceding his death, Don reassured his family that he was all right, that he was at peace, and that they too would be all right, comforting them as they provided comfort for him. A shepherd providing safety, sustenance, and hope to those he loves. Today has been a day of celebration and remembrance of the earthly life of Dr. Don. His example of servanthood, leadership, shepherding inspires us to be grateful and to resolve to live our lives with more care. Tomorrow, we celebrate Christ's resurrection, the victory of life over death. The Good Shepherd gave his life that by believing, we might live free from the limits of this mortal coil, that we might live the abundant life God intended for us, we might enjoy his presence forever.